Hey everybody, Blake T. Wild here, and we are officially in the scariest month of the year, which means that I am taking all 5 weeks of October to cover horrific comics on my What Is series. But don't fret, because coming back in November is both Squadron Supreme and The Ultimate Year. But I figured since we're in this scariest month, I need to make something special out of it. Halloween is my favorite holiday, and there are plenty of weird, strange, scary comics that nobody else is talking about, and surely these will not do well view-wise, but I wanted to talk about them. But also don't forget to check out my other 5-week-long series, Nightmare Arcade, where each week I play through a different horror video game. What is Batman's worst fear? Is it the Joker discovering his identity? Is it Mr. Freeze discovering his identity? Is it Bane discovering his identity? Is it the Riddler discovering his identity? Is it the public discovering his identity? Is it identity-based? Often, it kind of seems like it is, but let's find out if it is in this incredibly prescient issue of Detective Comics, which, spoiler alert, came out a year before Death in the Family. And before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe for more content just like this. It helps me out. And let me know in the comments down below what you think Batman's true worst fear would really be. And also don't forget to leave any recommendations down below on Ultimate Marvel comics that I need to get covering that I haven't already made videos of. Over on my Etsy shop, BlakeTWild.etsy.com, you can purchase issues 1 and 2 of the Custodians Agents of Cross. Each issue is over 50 pages of pure comics for only $15. You won't find a better deal like that for Marvel or DC these days. What happens when the fate of the world rests on the shoulders of an intelligent baboon, the world's smartest man who has the power of elasticity but only in his right arm, a pyrokinetic teenager, and a 4-armed werewolf. I also have all 5 issues of Destructo Boy available there as well. What's that? You don't like physical comics? Well, great, because over on my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey'sVideos, I have all the issues available digitally, published on there for only $2. Released in 1987, written by Mike W. Barr, with art by Alan Davis, this is Detective Comics Fear for Sale. Okay, so I feel like I need to make a little, preamble before we kind of get into this. So, originally, Jason Todd was just Robin 2.0. He was Dick Grayson in every way imaginable except for his name. Both were circus performers whose parents were offed in horrible ways, and then they went on to become Batman's sidekick. Yeah. But it wouldn't be until June 1987 that Jason Todd's origin in the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths universe would be kind of just like reintroduced and revamped into what we know and love. You know, when he's like a street urchin who's trying to like steal the tires off a Batmobile or something, whatever he does. This story is a pre-revamp story, which means that he's still the same lovable circus-performing child. If I had a nickel for every time that Batman had a circus-performing child whose parents were murdered become his sidekick, I'd only have 2, but it's weird it's happened twice. Back to back. But this was also prior to Jim Starlin suggesting that they kill off Jason Todd. This is around the time that the character itself was just getting poorly received by the audience. That's what part of the reason why they wanted to reinvent his identity and who Jason Todd was. The audience wasn't caring for it. Editorial didn't really have any ideas of what to do with him, since, like I said, he's literally just Robin 2.0. The book begins at the Gotham racetrack as Bruce Wayne and Jason Todd sit in the stands watching the event. In reality, of course, it's Batman and Robin investigating some suspicious activities. Because, you see, the past couple weeks there have been some accidents. Experienced drivers who really should have never made these mistakes are suddenly now making in a very quick span of time, and Batman's suspicious. Bruce watches as Jack Hogan, the new superstar in the racing scene, speeds around the track. He spots Hogan without his safety harness and a blank, blissfully absent expression on his face. Bruce leaps into action, bringing Jay, as he refers to Jason, The two switch into their outfits as the racers round the final turn. Hogan, however, doesn't pull back and careens into the first place car, causing his own to fly off the track and explode into a fire. As the fire engine arrives at the scene, Batman orders Jason, a child, to operate the firefighter's hose, drench him with it, and then Batman races into the flames. Jason sprays at the wild-growing fire as firefighters make their way and watches in horror as Batman emerges from the flaming wreckage, cradling a body and crying for Robin. What an eerie image this is, knowing what we know now. Batman emerges with Hogan and the two race him to the medics, and later at the hospital, Batman and Robin question the racer. He's obviously dazed and drugged up, but he still acts blissfully unaware of what happened. And later at the Batcave, Bruce runs some diagnostics on the blood sample he collected, and discovers it matches the chemical compound of the Scarecrow's fear toxin. Bruce gives Jay a rundown of who Scarecrow is, and I just absolutely love this image of the Scarecrow. It's just such a well-done illustration. Then they both suit up and head out in search of Dr. Jonathan Crane. Jason is tasked with staking out the hospital, and eventually, late into the night, the Scarecrow arrives in the hospital room of Jack Hogan. Scarecrow exposits that he made Hogan take a drug which removes fear from the mind to make him more attuned at racing. I guess it's like more likely to take risks that'll lead to a bigger win, I suppose. Anyway, Scarecrow tells the driver that he now owes him the rest of his payment, and that he better pay up because while he was asleep, Scarecrow injected his regular fear toxin into him and has the antidote on standby. What is happening in that man's body? Then Robin crashes through the window. He orders the Scarecrow to stand down and face repercussions by the hands of the law, and Scarecrow calms down when he realizes Batman's not there. Then he just casually removes a fear gas capsule, releases it into the room, and Robin is overtaken with its effects. And Jason watches in horror as Batman's burning corpse emerges from a sprawling hellfire, calling out to Jason that he failed Bruce, that Jason was supposed to save him and failed. And then Batman crumbles into dusty ruins as Scarecrow collects Jason in a big bag and instructs Hogan to leap out of the window. Then he skips off down the hospital hallways whistling a tune. And then, following that odd scene, we get an even weirder scene. Crane arrives that night at the house of a professional daredevil named Alvin Kenner to give him the offer of the Fearless drug. Then Scarecrow shoots him with a needle of the Fearless drug because he knows who Alvin Kenner really is, and Batman rips off his man suit and tries to attack the Scarecrow, but he's shot with 4 more drug darts, and Scarecrow just fires one more for good luck and leaves a note on where Batman can find him and what's at stake. And Batman, now rushing with energy and adrenaline and fearlessness, smirks at the challenge. Later, Batman overlooks the concrete factory that Scarecrow has commandeered, and he lands in the compound, and several trucks start to life, all remotely controlled by the Scarecrow. They speed at Batman, who, like a matador, narrowly dodges him. Then he tries to make himself focus and to fight the drug's effects, and leaps out of the way as the trucks all collide. He escapes into the factory and comes across massive grinders, which he decides to toss his utility belt into, so it'll halt the machine and he can slide past. He does just that and enters the facility in search of Robin and the Scarecrow. He works his way through a hallway and a massive spiked roller is released? What the fuck is this? What kind of concrete factory does Gotham City employ? Is this just like a way to make sure that the workers aren't taking breaks? Or is this something Scarecrow added? Because that seems like a lot of work for Dr. Jonathan Crane to go through. Maybe he got the toy maker. He contracted toy maker or somebody who's good with tech and gadgets and traps to redo this concrete factory that he seemingly owns. But then it gets even better, because Batman is chased down the hall and falls into a water pit that has giant machine guns built into the walls. that fire continuously for 10 fucking minutes. So Scarecrow decides that probably got him and deactivates the defenses. Then a little bit later, Batman appears and clocks Scarecrow in the face. Batman says that they need to search for the antidote quick because he's fucked up, and then they gotta distribute it to any other of his victims. Robin asks how the fuck he escaped that insane trap, and Batman reveals that he hid in the corner of the pit and used air that had become trapped in his cape to breathe.
But how did you overcome Scarecrow's drugs?
By replacing the fears that the drug nullified with a different fear. The most terrible fear I could ever conceive.
What was it?
Maybe someday I'll tell you. Maybe someday. The end. How haunting was that, right? Like, what an insane issue. Although it is kind of taken aback by the ridiculousness of a giant murdered by Scarecrow being engraved on the headstone of Jason Todd. I feel like it could have worked without that part, but it does give me an idea where if I ever die, I want that to be engraved. Here lies Blake T. Wilde, murdered by the Scarecrow. It's very silly at points, of course, but it's such a big gut punch at the very end of the issue. Just undoes any of that just ridiculous comic book reality, I feel. I love just the strange coincidences of Jason's fear visions as well. Because throughout this book, we get just repeating visuals of Batman emerging from fire and burning, smoking wreckages, carrying someone and crying out like he does with Jason's body in A Death in the Family. Also, just the darkness of Jason's vision when he gets the fear toxin, of Bruce screaming that Jason failed him. Like, that he was supposed to save him, you know? I don't take that as a literal saving, more of a conceptual one. Jason was meant to, you know, keep Bruce grounded, acting as like a stabilizing force in his life, especially after Dick Grayson left, because, you know, he starts off as this horribly brooding, violent vigilante. Dick Grayson brought light and joy to the grim life of the vigilantism. And then he leaves, and Bruce sort of starts that gradual decline back, and then he finds Jason, and he continues that protege aspect of Bruce teaching another young lost man to find meaning in the world by helping others. But, of course, we know what happens to Jason, and that is that his death left a void in Bruce that unleashed a darker, more violent side of Batman. Both the character in their reality of the comics, and the Batman as the franchise, the one in our reality. Because after that, we get Frank Miller's Batman, and then after that, we know what happens to Batman. It's such a tragic turning point in his life that just takes him back to that isolationist, violent creature of the night that is feared by all. And then there's something in Jason's mind that just... like, obviously, they're fighting crime, they're fighting villains, so he's afraid this whole book that he's going to die or Batman's going to die because of him. And it's just, it's a realistic, you know, feeling you'd have to take. And it's a realistic fear and thought process that these characters would be having. And that's what makes A Death in the Family, which is coming up in their timeline, so much more disheartening and depressing. But what were your thoughts on this comic of Batman's greatest fear? Let me know in the comments below. As always, check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Smokey'sVideos. Check out my Etsy shop at blaketwild.etsy.com, and follow me on all social media at NotBlakeWild. And check out my podcast, The Comic Shtick Podcast, where comics are my shtick. And I will see you ghosts and ghouls next time. Bye!